11 of lockdown, and I'm Anya Marco. I've also realised I've never introduced myself in these, so I think I should. By week 9, if you don't know who I am, then there's a worry here. But I've been in the industry for 20 odd years, and I know quite a lot about coffee and the market. So I'm always joined every week by people who know a lot more than me. And in fact, this week is no exception, because this is the one about social enterprise, and how different members of our society have been indirectly impacted actually by the lockdown, not just because they may be invisible to us in our daily lives, but also because some businesses that are set up to help them have had to close. So with that in mind, I am joined by Wagg of Well Grounded Jobs, Ezel of Change Please, and of course, as always, Max Dubiel from Redemption Roasters. Now, all three of you run amazing social enterprise businesses that are coffee focused. And rather than me describe you, I thought it was way more important that each of you tells our audience what it is you do as a coffee business, and how that affects or rather serves a social impact. So Max, why don't you start with Redemption Roasters and we'll go out.
Sure. We are a prison-based coffee company. We roast all of our coffee in HMP The Mount, just north of London, and we teach offenders coffee skills with the aim of getting them into employment on their release. And we also have a couple of coffee academies up and down the country in other prisons where we teach coffee skills, but we don't roast. And place guys into employment. It's always important to say that we're not a charity, we're a business, but we have a social purpose.
Cool, great. And Eve?
Yeah, we run a series of specialty coffee academies across London. We exist to empower unemployed people into careers in the coffee industry. So that looks like specialty coffee association training, but a blended curriculum with employability skills, mental health provision, employability skills, and looking at their wider support and mentorship and coaching. And then we have an aftercare program that transitions people into employment across the industry. So we've graduated 234 individuals and supported 161 into careers across coffee, and in fact across into all kinds of employers, including Change Please, Old Spike and Redemption Roasters. So it's really lovely to all be here together. And yeah, so I think what we also have as part of our ongoing program is a professional development service. So that looks at supporting people into careers, not just in baristas, but also as roasters, as in marketing, in wholesale, in all the different areas of coffee, that we know there's so many opportunities for people to grow and progress.
And is it specifically vulnerable adults that you focus on, or and is it also people with, say, learning disabilities?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we work with a really, really broad range of people that are facing some form of barrier into employment. We don't work with a specific target group. We work with people across all different areas. And so our learning is in a way that is accessible to people with neurodiversity needs, or people that have additional needs. That means that we have to look at educational theory to back up the learning that we give them to ensure that it's accessible.
Great, thank you. So very inclusive. And Cemal, Change Please.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Change Please and the co-founder of Old Spike Roastery. And at the heart, we're an organisation that's been set up to tackle homelessness through a job-first model. So to give people who are homeless an opportunity to lift themselves out of homelessness and not be dependent on the government for handouts or people walking past that person on the streets for handouts. And essentially those opportunities are through specialty barista roles. So we will find people, train them, give them a London living wage job, provide them with housing in 10 days, a bank account, therapy support, and then a support into a new job, typically around 6 months later. And, you know, the breadth of people that fit in within homelessness is quite broad, whether they're victims of domestic abuse, ex-offenders, military veterans, people with mental health issues. So our key focus really is to give those people an opportunity and use the broad range of chances that we have in coffee to kind of lift people out of the issues that they're in. And we're in the UK, Ireland, just opened in Paris 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
In Australia since last year. So this year was meant to be our US year, but it's kind of coronavirus is kicking that in the teeth. So it's great to see how coffee can be a force for good for all of our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing I love about this industry is it's always been so passionate about people. And I think when I first met you, Cemal and Max, I became even more excited that there were businesses actually focused on areas that, in fact, very few people realise this, but have directly affected my life. In fact, all three of your businesses, the types of people you're working with, I've had direct involvement with. So I feel very passionate and sort of personally involved, even though I'm not. With your businesses. So with that in mind, and given that, you know, there's been very little kind of consideration, I guess, or even exposure on the news about what's happening in prisons, what's happened to homelessness. I mean, I know that in London there was a very brief sort of mention that people that were homeless were going to be homed in the empty hotels and things like that. Nothing's really been mentioned about vulnerable adults and the impact they must be feeling in terms of being stuck, and also the fact that most of them are probably still or potentially still with elderly parents and things like that. There's so many different topics that must be affecting people. What for you, when this first happened, what was the most concerning aspect of the lockdown for your business from that point of view?
So for us, I think the first thing that came to mind was that prisons tend to, in these kinds of scenarios, be disproportionately badly affected, just because a lot of people in close proximity very difficult to distance than lack of PPE, that kind of thing. So being a prison-based company, I thought about our roastery, I thought about our trainees, thought about our staff, obviously, and just not being able to roast and not being able to teach on the inside.
Yeah. What about you, Eve?
I think it's so complex and multifaceted, but I think the big impact, there was two really. The first was that we were on program with 24 people across both of our main academies who were 9 weeks into a 10-week traineeship, had jobs lined up on completion, and not only with there's a real sense of camaraderie and wanting to get to the end and accredit and move into employment. So I think for the immediate concern was, how do we get those individuals accredited and get them in the best position we can? And so we kind of stayed late for those last 2 days while we were open, before we had to temporarily close the training academies to accredit and to kind of move into our aftercare program. And then secondary was, and I'm sure all of us, was looking at our wider population of graduates. We work with 234 individuals who've come through our training and we're really close to, and how are we going to pivot our services online immediately, because already they were coming to us asking for our support and advice, and all that aftercare provision became, now we have 400% increase in our demand for that service. So really it became, how can we transition and make this transition as quickly and safely as possible to meet those needs.
And did that result, sorry, before we go on to Cemal, I'm just curious, did that result in you creating new services and sort of and new approaches to them? Is it something that you would then think about continuing going forward?
Yeah, it's been a bit of both. It's been extending our capacity to deliver our existing services. So our mentorship, one-to-one coaching, job brokering. We're supporting people into other careers, other industries, and we've had some success there, which has been really positive. Our signposting and our work around mental health provision. So it's been increasing that service and transitioning it safely online. But then, we've developed now a new virtual online platform for learning. So 70% of our graduates have said we want to keep our skills live, we want to train, we want to, so that when things change we can come back to the industry even more equipped with the skills that are needed. So we launched straight away an online training platform so people could do that, and so in terms of what we'll probably come on to later, how we're going to take that forward and build in our direct delivery is something that we're working to, and we've got some really exciting ideas. But it's been an element of moving existing services online and then building up more, supporting people with accessing benefits, understanding what furlough means. So much, we work with 120 employers, and we've supported a large proportion into work, and they're like, well, what does furloughing mean? What does my budget look like now? What is my incoming? So all of that we've had to upskill ourselves in that knowledge and development as well. But I think the beauty of both the coffee industry, but also, you know, the fact that we are lucky enough to straddle different sectors, is that collaboration is absolutely fundamental to what we do. And so working with third sector organizations, working with each other, working with our graduates has been, you know, so powerful in enabling us to do that.
That's amazing. Thank you. And Cemal, how about you in terms of, I mean, I can imagine there's been a million sort of concerns that immediately hit you. But what would you say was sort of the biggest thing that you were concerned about initially?
Yeah, and you know, being brutally honest, it was, are we going to keep going financially in the next 2 or 3 months? You know, just as a raw basic kind of, that was the first thing that comes to mind. And then as soon as you start to realise, right, if we make it till mid-June, July, this is pre-furlough, by the way, this is just looking at our bank account, then the next most important thing for us to focus on is the duty of care and responsibility we have to the people that, like Eve, are kind of in between cohorts. So they've just been trained, they're ready to go into the next phase. And we had 36 people that actually were going to go back to the streets fundamentally. And we've got a slightly bigger responsibility because they rely on us for their housing.
Yeah.
So jobs are one thing. Jobs are great because that means they're slightly more independent, or they could have been on furlough, or they could have been receiving support in other ways. But we have that responsibility to house people. So we still are paying for people's accommodation, whether they're in hostels or in temporary accommodation. We pay daily towards their travel costs, their food bills. But the biggest thing that we've had to do, and that wasn't planned right at the beginning, was to pay for occupational therapists and a clinical psychologist to give counselling support services. Because, you know, you've gone from being a victim of domestic abuse, and you've got that kind of those confidence issues, and you've been used to working in front of people and building up your confidence back in a public environment, and all of a sudden you're now at home in lockdown. You're at home in lockdown, and those mental health challenges and issues came to the forefront. So we started to get people who were becoming more depressed, becoming more isolated. So that counselling support became absolutely vital for us to keep supporting our staff. And then, stupidly, we were opening in Paris at the same time, which we had to take on new employees, and partly some were employed and some were formerly homeless, and learning to cope with a new employment law system in France and not being able to rely on the furlough system. It was just a massive issue, challenge, headache, you know. So the fact that we're still alive and going to kind of support people in the future is a relief. And secondly, the fact that our staff that were in between roles, that we didn't furlough, are still okay and excited to get going, that's something that's really exciting for us.
So that leads me brilliantly to the next question. So how were you? And let you carry on, Mark, because you sort of said that you were able to carry on and you were able to overcome these sort of challenges. I mean, how were you able to do that? What was it that you put in place to sort of, I mean, the fact that you were in Paris and France does have a very different employment law situation, and if I remember rightly, quite strict and quite challenging. A bit like Germany as well, I think, Max. So not just on Paris, but on the whole business, how were you able to overcome those challenges? What did you do? How did you adapt?
I mean, literally one word, and that's furlough. We had enough money to last 2 or 3 months, and without the furlough system. I mean, we have some clients a couple of banks that isolated some of their top employees, their execs, their traders into bunkers around London, and we've been providing coffee services for them. Right. And apart from that, our revenue's gone down to zero. We've escalated, like most businesses, coffee businesses, into online services. So our training, but also our subscription coffee, our home delivery coffee, and now we're starting to see some of our clients coming back in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, there is no magic answer to that question. And I think most coffee businesses are in the same situation. Yeah. We're just waiting for things to reopen again. And as much as possible, serve from a socially distant space, but none of our sites really were suitable for that. And now we're starting to kind of pivot into being able to open more sites. But yeah, there's no magic answer, just online furlough saved us, and some few little accounts that needed our services.
And how about you, Eve? How did you sort of start, apart from, I mean, obviously you touched upon the fact that you changed your approach somewhat in terms of going, you know, immediately launching online services and training. Was there anything else that particularly helped you overcome some of the challenges that you were facing?
Yeah, I think we kind of sit in a slightly, because we don't have any sites or kind of a coffee product in the same way. I think for us, but we do have traded income. So we did have a 40% loss overnight of the activities that are around earned income and not our kind of voluntary income. But for us and for me, the way we overcame that, you know, it's a massive increase in our casework and our one-to-one support, which was the biggest challenge for us, and how we met that demand, because we too are facing kind of longer term sustainability challenges. So we haven't really used the furlough scheme internally, because we haven't, because if we did, we would have to reduce our service. So that was a really hard thing to try and navigate, because if we did, then that would have an impact, but also you are trying to think about the long-term sustainability and making sure, as we're talking about that, we have a moral responsibility to be here next year, you know. So I think for me, the three key ways that we overcame was my team. Like, I think everyone has spoken about in these video casts, but also more widely, the people that you work with, how close you've become, how you've managed that change, how open, transparent dialogue has been absolutely essential for us. And I think, again, because like many, there's a shared value, shared culture, shared vision. So to mobilize and energize yourself in that direction has been absolutely essential. I think, again, we've touched on, we are very relational led, like as all nonprofits. So we have incredible employers, partners, from third sector to the industry, and being able to connect and communicate with all those different parts of our business and have those open and honest conversations has enabled us to transition quickly and adapt. And increasingly with funders, you know, our funders, the voluntary sector, have really listened and have responded well, which has been incredible for us as a non-profit sector. I think thirdly, we quite quickly developed like an advisory group with our beneficiaries, and we've spoken to 120 directly around what are your needs, because we can't have that direct contact, which was so vital in terms of getting that two-way dialogue around what needs are, how can we respond to them. We've had to do that virtually, but that's been absolutely essential in how we've pivoted, but also in how we've measured that pivot and measured that we're still having that impact, and whether we need to change things and whether we need to adapt. And so I think for me, those three key things have helped us overcome those initial challenges.
And Max, I know you're sort of in the process of having one story open, and I know we've spoken in previous episodes about the value of furlough, but was there anything else that helped you overcome the challenges, specifically around, you know, how your sort of prison activities were effectively just cut off overnight?
Yes, I mean, when it all kicked off, I think information started trickling through, and much like Cemal and Eve, we were very worried about cash and survival. We were in a lucky position because we just closed a fundraise in December, and as much as we would have liked to expand with those funds, it's now more of a survival fund. But hey, it's better than not. And furlough has helped us massively. The government schemes have helped us as well with all 5 shops. I think 4 were eligible, and the government isn't given enough credit for it. I think what they've done and how quickly they've paid it was amazing. It's really amazing how many businesses and jobs they managed to save, certainly in the short and midterm. And then for us, it was about pivoting. Our web store started taking off really well. It was about supporting clients. We've talked about this in previous episodes, about fixing the roof, fixing some things, launching a new website, launching an app, speaking to our clients and seeing whether maybe we can do some things better, and then slowly looking at relaunching in a in a different format. So looking at social distancing, looking at in and out ways, looking at perspex and takeaway only. And one of our shops has reopened now. It's been open for 4 weeks now, and it's doing okay. It's obviously much reduced staff, long queues, and takeaway only. But it's very much on an upward trajectory. And I think with all shops opening, or retail shops opening in mid-June, that will definitely help the sort of retail-y areas. So we're opening our King's Cross shop on the 15th of June. And then time will tell whether we can open our city shops. We've got 3, depending on how quickly workers are going to come back. I think estimates are that 15% of city workers will be back by the end of June. But 15% is not worthwhile for any coffee business to open stores.
And I was just going to say, sorry.
Yeah.
So we did a piece with Social Enterprise UK earlier in the week on ITV, and we got a briefing document from on SE UK, and the stats that they sent us were shocking. So this is generally for social enterprises. They said 50% of social enterprises could be out of funds and out of business by June 2020. So by the end of June 2020, and 1 million jobs, including over 200,000 in the poorest communities, are at risk in the next 2 months. And it's completely different to traditional business, because we have got beneficiaries and people that we support as part of, we're not for profit, so all that revenue is going to support people. So the indirect impact of this situation is, that's why SE UK are asking and demanding government to see us in a slightly different way to traditional business, and to kind of see what other opportunities they could be to help, because it's such a massive issue, not just for the businesses, but all of the vulnerable community groups, that we support.
What's happening with them? What's happening to them? And how can we look after this element of society going forward with the new normal, whatever that's going to be?
Yeah. So as of end of March, all prisons went into lockdown. All education workers have been asked to stand down, and only essential workshops, sort of like the laundry, are kept going. Businesses like us who work in prisons have been asked to cease all education activity, but businesses that have been qualified as essential food businesses could continue, in our case, roasting, which was a big relief. Overall, the UK very luckily hasn't had the kind of problems that we've seen in other countries like Italy or the US, with huge numbers of infections in prisons. They were quite quick to act, and have had only 4 confirmed cases of deaths amongst prisoners, with a population of 85,000, and I think 17 with staff. Tragic, of course, but in proportion to the overall population, it's underrepresented. So that's a good thing. Reason being probably is that prisons are very good at locking down, at social isolation. That's what they do.
They do, yeah.
But the flip side of this is very much the flip side, as it is for everyone else, but much stronger, and that is the mental health aspect.
Yeah.
So all of our guys, or the large majority of our guys, have had to spend 23.5 hours a day in their cells. And I think the long-term effects and the mental health effects of that are yet to be seen. And it's a very, very tough time to be in prison right now. And it was tough for us to see, because we like to be in touch, we like to do something, we like to get them out, and then obviously offer job prospects. And there was none of that, because it all had to cease.
And I think it's important to say as well that with the prison sort of situation, is that members of the society, or the prison society, so convicts or inmates, whatever you want to call them, ultimately those of them that have committed crimes that can be rehabilitated are actually they're losing the chance of rehabilitation. So in actual fact, what it also means is that there's every chance that with their mental health being affected so badly, that rehabilitation is going to be even harder, and therefore you know, recommitting crimes more likely when they are released. And you know, I've got firsthand of my father went to prison for a, you know, a blue collar crime. It wasn't a terrible crime, but had he not had that chance of rehabilitation, he would have done the same thing again. And so I think that's missed.
I think that there has been, like with all of us, quite a lot of change and phases as we're all facing within our business, but also personally. You know, we've had over 2/3 have said that they're facing financial hardship at the moment, but that is very likely to increase and become more acute as the furloughing scheme ends. And I think we know that makes complete sense, and we know that's going to be the case. We also know, like Cemal said, that there is high levels of anxiety and high levels of mental health challenges across the whole of the population. But that is a key impact. And also lots of people looking at how they can empower themselves during this time. How can we stay active? How can we stay empowered? And how can we work towards a positive future? And then you couple that with, as we talked about, the macro issues around, you know, the speed of which unemployment has risen is greater than, you know, 1947 is what it's being reflected in terms of like big studies around the Institute of Employment. So we're looking at individuals around a massive global and national climate of huge change. So I think we are all trying to navigate those phases and put in place the right provision and the right support at this time, whilst predicting what that looks like in the future. And I think experiences like this and conversations like this, but also much more widely with lots of non-profits who are looking at how we can nationally respond and support the impact that is coming, is absolutely fundamental. But for us, it is actually looking at how can we help people now, which is, you know, this week, what is the supervision? And, you know, for us, it's gone from moving people into meaningful employment to allowing people to feel supported, having calls with people, connecting. And like the coffee industry, it's all around connections. And, you know, 100% of people are now saying they feel better supported from speaking with us. And that for us is, you know, what we want to try and impart, because there is someone there looking out for everyone, like we all hopefully have people looking out for us at this time.
Yeah. And Cemal, you must find that as well. I mean, given that you raised the topic, what can we do? I mean, is there anything that, you know, can we join in with in terms of, you know, putting pressure on the government? What else can we do going forwards?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, there needs to be an understanding about the core challenges that people are going through. And from our perspective, we saw a lot of our staff, if you can imagine being on the streets for 2, 3, 4 years, and a lot of different organisations trying to support you, giving you hope, things falling through, you lose that hope, you try and start again, you rebuild up that courage to keep going, and then you're just about to get a new opportunity to start in a new coffee role, you've been trained, and then coronavirus kicks in. So it's just, we started to kind of identify out of those 36 people that we struggled with to find, from the mental health perspective, and fell between the gaps, we found about 6 or 7 of those that really, really were struggling. And for our team, it was all about education and trying to educate people around why they're struggling so much, what the core issues are, making people understand and have a bit more sympathy around their challenges, and really share that amongst our team. But then also from a community perspective, you know, when things do get to open, come out and buy coffee from not just social enterprises, spend your money, come out back to the streets, and just and really remember that, you know, everyone's struggling and being in a difficult situation. What we tried to do during the coronavirus period was support the NHS as much as we can, like Redemption have done, and we set up in 6 different hospitals around the country, in three Nightingales, and we just gave out free coffee to nurses and doctors, and we gave employment to those vulnerable people, of the 36 people that were struggling, the 6 or 7 of those, just to get them out of the house, out of their hostels, and into somewhere that's you know, in front of a nurse and a doctor that have been so revered in these difficult times to feel like they can give something back. And that completely flipped around those mental health issues from being isolated, depressed, lonely, to being like feeling amazing about themselves, that they're doing good. And that was something that shows me that the power of employment can give to people that are vulnerable, to make them have dignity, self-belief, self-confidence. It's absolutely fundamental, and why social enterprise is so important to the world that we live in.
And at the moment,
Cemal, the hospitals that we supported mostly just with beans for frontline workers, and we very often had the comment, but why can't you guys set up here and have a pop-up and actually serve cups of coffee? And we said, look, we don't have the capacity to do that. We don't have pop-ups, and you guys did exactly that. Really, really cool. Well done.
I mean, look, we're starting to reopen. You know, Max has got one open. We've said this already. Cemal, have you got anything reopening at the moment or ready to reopen?
Well, we've got some of our corporate partner locations, like
Okay.
teetering, some WeWork locations, but no. I mean, Borough Market's quite close, but not really anything in the next couple of weeks, I think.
Sure. So,
one question actually, Cemal, that I was interested in dealing with homelessness and supporting with housing. I did read that the government was supporting homeless people and at the core of the crisis with hotels. Is that still the case? Was that just occasionally? Was that pure window dressing, or did it actually help the cause?
No, there was a huge amount of support from the government to try and to deliver it, and I think they supported 3,000 people out of the 6,700 that are homeless, rough sleeping. It didn't necessarily help the 470,000 people that are homeless across the country but aren't rough sleeping. So people that were sofa surfing, that had to continue sofa surfing, people sleeping in buses, parks, that don't count in that 6,700. But for those 3,000 people, it was a massive help, and that was that I believe lasted for about 6 weeks, a month to 6 weeks. And one of the other areas that we did was to go to, because if you imagine you're rough sleeping, nearly all of your income is coming from donations and begging and asking the public. There's no one out there who's giving you money anymore. So we were doing food drops and parcels to hotels, like the Travelodge, just delivering food parcels to people that are homeless. And actually, it makes you realise how symbiotic our communities are, you know. You need people on the streets to support people that are homeless. And when all that starts to stop, you realise the fragility of our communities. So there was a lot of help by the government. And actually, it just makes you think, if they're able to do that then, why they're not able to do that for the rest of the year or the rest of our times. And it kind of falls back to our mission. And my personal reason for setting up Change Please is that we do go out of business. You know, we want to close down. We want to go bankrupt in 6-7 years because we've achieved our mission, you know, and that for me really just struck me as, blimey, it's that easy to sign a check and fix 50% of the rough sleeping problem in our country. Why can't that be done in the majority of the time? So it did help, Max, but it was short-lived. And actually, to give the government credit, I don't think it was window dressing. I think they genuinely wanted to kind of get people off the streets to stop the spread of the virus. But it just shows that what can be done.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't realised it had ended, but I thought exactly the same thing, Cemal. When it happened and it came up on the news, I literally turned to my husband and said, well, why haven't they done that before? You know. Okay, so
can I just say on that point, I think there is also around some of the really positive community-based activity that's happening, which is, you know, the people's, you know, looking out for their street, looking out for their community. Around, we also, you know, providing food packages, but when we are actually going to provide food packages, a lot of our graduates are saying, oh, my neighbour's just dropping something off, don't worry. And that sense of people mobilising around supporting each other and kindness has been a really really positive, I think, change that we've seen, which leads to why a lot of people now want to buy consciously and buy and spend their money in a way that affects change. So I think that's really, and also we are starting to see positive movements of people now having virtual trials. So this week we've had lots of our grads now having virtual trials and starting to actually get new employment opportunities because operators are opening in different ways. And so I think, and so many of our graduates and the wider hospitality industry engaging in online learning is showing some really positive things that are happening that I think sometimes, it's good to focus on as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely right. We've got a food bank, 2 food bank drops in our village as well, that the local pub closed and then just opened themselves up as a food bank instead, for instance. And I think there's examples of that everywhere. Absolutely. What is going to happen when you are looking at reopening your businesses in terms of the social distancing? Because we're not going to just reopen and go straight back to normal. We know that social distancing is going to be around for, as the scientific advisors were saying, I think last night, for months, maybe even longer than months, going forward. And all of your businesses rely on working with vulnerable people who may struggle with social distancing. How are you thinking? And I know you may not have concrete plans right now, because we're talking certainly a few weeks before any of you have to be fully reopened, and maybe months. But what are your thoughts around how you're going to manage that in the sort of near future? Max, maybe you can start, because you've already started thinking about it.
I think in the short term, store layouts will have to change.
Yeah.
I don't think it's realistic to separate staff individually. I think if you're back at the workplace, you are like sharing a flat with your colleagues in that sense. You're touching the same surfaces, you are touching the same machines. But of course, there needs to be protection from customers, and there needs to be a barrier. Distancing will be very important. Cleaning routines, in and outdoors, takeaway only for some time. There is talks with some councils that I think we spoke about this yesterday, Anya. Some councils are looking to open for more street seating.
Pedestrianisation, yeah.
So the talk is that sometime in July, education in prisons can resume, which is very good news. And it means that it will be one of the first education institutions to resume. At the moment, there's still talks between unions and prison and the Ministry of Justice. Every prison will need to present their plan, how they can safely allow working within the prisons in education and in workshops. And that plan needs to be signed off. And we hope that with the right measures in place and the right safety measures, we can start as well.
And Eve, do you think you'll continue with online training as you sort of ease back to being able to do more face-to-face work?
Yeah, so I think what this has shown is the power of online learning, and it's something that what we're doing now is mapping all our training and all our learning from how we reach people and reach into communities for people to come on and come onto our programs, through to assessment and then their professional development. What of that can we deliver online? I think for us, it's absolutely imperative that there is face-to-face delivery. We're all about, like everyone here, around community and building connections, and knowing that connections are what really affect change. And so for us, it's around what can be delivered online. If you think about apprenticeships and adult learning, there is so many incredible e-learning platforms. So how do we utilize that? And in fact, we're launching a More Than the 234 campaign, which looks at looking at using a virtual platform to deliver a lot of these services online. But also being so fundamentally clear that there is a lot of people that need face-to-face but also can't access online learning. But how can we adapt and use our expertise as in supporting people who have English as additional language, supporting digital literacy, supporting those that have neurodiversity, so that if we do go online, that they are still able to access the curriculum. And I get also, whilst on lockdown, looking at working with the SEA on delivering, now we can deliver the foundation level qualifications virtually. And how do we embed that into our plans now and in the future, so that we improve our service and use this time to improve what we can deliver. So I think there's some really positive changes that we can make as an organisation, not only to help our graduates and our new trainees, but also the wider industry, and offer that out to the wider industry. But whilst being really mindful that it's not the right learning for everyone. And that's a really key point for us.
Yeah, I mean, we have touched on training a few times around the complications, particularly of actual physical, milk foaming and the actual making of beverages, that it does need face-to-face at the end of the day. It's just, you can't get around it. Even my amazing VR idea just isn't just not going to cut it. So and Cemal, you know, just sort of ending with you in terms of how you're going to be navigating bringing people back into the business from furlough, that you know, and getting back into actually working on the sort of rehoming that you're doing, and all of that amazing work. What is that going to look like, and how is the social distancing going to work for you? Because you, as you say, you have quite a few venues that are quite small, so it doesn't really work. What are your thoughts at the moment? And obviously, you know, I know you haven't got concrete plans, but where are you looking at moving towards?
Yeah, so they're going to be in line with the furlough changes that are happening soon, but also in line with demand and increase in footfall in some of our locations. So fundamentally, you know, if both of those two coincide, then that would be a perfect situation. But we're expecting at least, so we've got 72 members of staff, and majority of those we're going to unfurlough within the next month to 6 weeks. And it's just a case now of seeing which of those sites are going to be most suitable to Borough Market, for example, and making sure that I mean, part of our challenge is, in a lot of our locations, we've implemented PPE restrictions. Even on the NHS sites, we told our staff that here's perspex screens, here's masks, here's gloves, and especially with working with doctors and nurses that are potentially slightly more contagious because they're working people each day, the staff just felt like they didn't really want to use them. So it's like, where do we draw a line from a cafe perspective? Do you say, look, you can only work if you use PPE equipment, or these are just recommended guidelines? You know, it's that creating those policies internally where we make it safe for our staff, but then also from a public perspective, making them feel comfortable that it's actually okay. I was doing a webinar this morning on future technology in coffee, and, you know, definitely one of the future rollouts are going to be on, you know, prepaid and click and collect services. And I think that's something that, you know, if I was looking at investing in anything, that's what I'd invest in, because it fundamentally will make a lot of customers and our employees feel safer about going and buying or serving coffees. So that's something which I think we need to, and most coffee shops should start implementing, just to make it as convenient for that coffee to be there waiting for you as soon as you've 2 or 3 minutes after you've ordered it. From our trainees and beneficiary perspective, we have an issue with the employment opportunities that we provide pre-long term. So the temporary employment opportunities are all through our locations. Right. So we give that patient employment before they go on to a longer term employment. So without our sites being open, there's going to be a backlog of employees who just won't be able to find opportunities, unless we say, actually, you know, 10% of those people that we would have brought in are immediately available or ready for a longer term employment, which just isn't the case. You're not going to find that magic 10%. So we almost have to wait and put things on hold from an impact perspective until our commercial sites are ready. And it's just the way it is. We've just got to take a deep breath and make sure that when things are ready, then we've done everything we can do to make it safe, potentially sustainable for us from a commercial perspective, and you know, puts everybody in the best kind of position to make it successful.
It's a really interesting point, Cemal, also with PPE and hygiene procedures. I think you and I both having a roastery as well as a bunch of coffee operations, where we're probably one step ahead in terms of food hygiene, because we know it from the roastery. If you package coffee, it's a completely different game to if you have one coffee shop. Most people who have one coffee shop sort of wing food hygiene in this country. It's not enforced, it's pretty relaxed. And I think that's going to change. And HACCP protocols will have to be in place. Staff are going to have to be much more thoroughly trained. Councils are probably going to crack down a lot more on offenders. And that'll change the coffee scene quite a bit, and the hospitality scene as well. And then how do you enforce it? I mean, we currently don't have a strict rule on whether mouth guards have to be worn. We obviously supply everything, but some staff don't feel comfortable wearing them, and so it's very much up to the businesses to come up with suitable guidelines, in touch with government regulations and guidance, but also in touch with what are customers comfortable with. Some customers say, I don't actually want to be served by someone who's wearing full PPE because it reminds me of a hospital. It doesn't remind me of a nice coffee shop.
Well, on that point, Max, obviously, I mean, you know that I've been doing behind the scenes this sort of benchmarking piece for people that are taking part, and there's a small amount of consumer insight in there, and I just literally just checked, because I did ask the question on how comfortable people are going to be going back to coffee shops and purchasing food for fear of contamination on packaging, and actually most of the consumers that answered that question said they weren't concerned. And that in fact they would continue to purchase food rather than the question was, would you stop purchasing food for fear of it being contaminated? And literally I think it was 10% said that they agreed with that. Everybody else disagreed with that. So you're right. I think consumers are far more resilient than we give them credit for. We are consumers, you know, so our own behavior is always a good measure of you know, the people that we are serving at the end of the day. So yeah. Listen, this has been a great in-depth and long episode, so I think there's a lot for people to take away. I'm very grateful to all three of you for sharing as much as you have about your concerns, about your beneficiaries, and about what's happening out there, and opening some people's eyes, hopefully. We're going to have a break next week, everybody that's watching this, so if you're subscribers, there won't be a new episode next week because I've just mentioned the benchmarking report, and I am going to be head down writing a report for those people who have taken part. But we will be back the following week. We'll have a great big stonking marketing episode to help all businesses understand better how to market their business with some really great guests who are going to share some really important free tips. We then have a supplier episode, and then we come back to having another operator episode where we're going to be talking to operators who have reopened and find out about what's going on. There's still lots more to come, so don't panic about a week off next week. We will be back. In the meantime, thank you, Cemal, so much. Thank you, Eve, and thank you, Max. And we'll see you in episode 10 in 2 weeks' time.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.